Welcome to the Doyenne of Death podcast, funeral planning for those who don't plan to die. It's all about end-of-life issues and getting the conversation started about our 100% mortality rate. This series is hosted by Gail Rubin, certified thanatologist and the Doyenne of Death. A doyenne is a woman who's considered senior in a group and knows a lot about a particular subject. Well, that's Gail. She knows all about creating the party no one wants to plan, a funeral or memorial service. She discusses the changes death can bring, and she'll make you laugh. This series includes episodes previously released as A Good Goodbye, a treasure trove of evergreen podcasts about funeral planning issues. This podcast reveals some of the mysteries and shares advice and tools that can reduce stress at times of grief, minimize family conflict, and help create a good goodbye. Remember, just as talking about sex won't make you pregnant, talking about funerals won't make you dead, and your family will benefit from the conversation. So, here to talk about the subjects we sometimes avoid is author, speaker, and the Doyenne of Death, Gail Rubin.
Welcome. This is part 2 of our 2-part episode. If you missed part 1, do yourself a favor and go back to listen. And now back to more with the Doyenne of Death. Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with Dr. Jeff Piehler. So Jeff, when we went to the break, we were starting to talk about the discussions you and your wife have been having about what it'll be like after you're gone. What were you leading towards talking about in that regard?
Well, I have... I mentioned earlier my desire to sort of control this process, and there have been times where I've clearly over controlled it or tried to. Not with my wife. Jean and I have been totally open with each other, and we have conversations now. I show her how you have to reset the VCR, and it's everyone knows why she needs to know that, and where the tax forms are kept, and this is all just the way it is, and it's gotten to a point where it's sort of unsaid why these things need to be discussed, but it's totally accepted, and we've also had the very hard discussion. When I'm not here, what relationships are you going to feel comfortable with? And, my feelings about, I want her to be the happiest woman in the world, and I put her through so much the last 10 years, and I would be ecstatic if she could make up for lost time in her life, however she felt it was appropriate. So those are pretty elemental discussions. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, we've been, and I think I've erred on trying to protect people a little bit from the grieving process. And I'd say, particularly with regard to my children, I've got 4 children, ranging from age 38 down to my daughter who's 24, and I have a son 26 and a daughter 24, and for the 2 younger kids, both of them, my wife and I have perceived to be a bit more vulnerable about this whole process, and so we've sort of spared them the play-by-play, if you will, the result of every scan, and my older boys have been interested in that, and I've shared it with them, but the younger not so much, and so I told my friend Peter about my desire that maybe the coffin project, which we were engaged in at the time, if he runs into my kids or something, was something that my wife and I had decided not to share with them at this point during the construction phase. And Peter, in his wisdom, said, Jeff, I think they're very much old enough to handle this, and you're really doing them a disservice by keeping them separate from this should share in this whole process, and they should share in the meaning of it. And he said that if you don't give people a chance to express the full range of their emotion and reaction to what you're going through, then when you leave them, there's a feeling that there's so much left unsaid. That, gee, if I'd known that, I would have said this to Dad. And I think I came to see that he was right. And so, with my wife's permission, and of course by then the New York Times piece was going to come out, and so that certainly forced my hand, because I didn't want my two kids, the youngest kids, to hear about this from someone else. Mm-hmm. And so I went to first my 26-year-old son, and I explained what I was doing on all these days that I was down at the shop with Peter. And I said, I've written something about it, which I actually submitted to a newspaper, and it was accepted, and would you like to read it? And interestingly, he said no. He didn't want to read it. He just wanted to kind of think about what I'd told him thus far, and he was not terribly comfortable with going any further with it at that point. And I said, okay. And then a day or so later, I spoke to my daughter, and she's much more sort of auditory in her learning than visual. And I explained to her what I'd been doing, and she kind of paused for a second, and I said, would you like me to read to you what I've sent in to the New York Times that was accepted? And she said, yeah. And she and I have a very close relationship. And so we both kind of popped up onto her bed with a dog and a cat, and I started reading. And I read her the piece, and at the end she paused and said, "Well, I need to think about that too." But I could tell that she was in a different place. She was much more at ease with it, and I said, "Well, if you have any questions, you want to talk about it some more anytime, I'll make time, and there's nothing more important in my life than giving you time to understand all this." Mm-hmm. And so, about 2 days later, I was sitting in our living room reading, and she came up to me, and she's a calligrapher as a part-time hobby, and she came up to me with a piece of paper, and written on this piece of paper in absolutely exquisite calligraphy was the quote, which is embossed on the underside of the coffin lid. And the quote is, "I have loved the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night." A beautiful quote. And she had done that in calligraphy. And she handed it to me, and she said, "Daddy, I want you to have this, and I want it to go in the coffin with you. I want you to have something now that I worked really hard on, and something that'll bring you joy, and something that you know will be with you."
Oh, nice.
And, so there, I'd have to say, besides the immediate rush of emotion, of just love, that's, what else can you say? I also felt kind of foolish that I'd kept this from her. But I also felt very relieved that I had broken this bottleneck, and that her emotions could flow out. And subsequent to that, my son, my youngest son, he has come around. He's read the piece, and I called him. I called him the other day, or I guess actually he called me. I was down at the shop with Peter, and we were doing the final. We were putting handles on the coffin, and Ben asked me, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm down here with Peter. We're putting the handles on. And he said, well, make sure that they're going to hold. I don't want you dropping through this thing. So, I think that's his way of accepting this whole thing too, and everyone has to do it their own way. But I think we're all on the same path, maybe in little different places, but we're all headed for the same destination.
Yeah. We actually have a phone call for you. It's a lady named Kyle would like to speak to you. Are you available? Hello?
I am.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from, I have to turn off because I'm listening to this. I'm calling from Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and I wrote a response that was published in the New York Times.
Really?
I did, because I'm so touched by this, and I was so happy to see that Jeff was going to be on your show tonight. I'm trying to start this little business of helping people plan their funerals in advance, and I'm just so glad that there's people out there already doing it and talking about it, and I just want to just say how touched I am and appreciative of what you're doing and putting your story out there so that other people can be influenced and inspired to do it, because knowing that it was hard and that your family struggled with it at first and you persevered, I feel like that's so great for other families to hear and other individuals to hear, to press on if you feel inclined to do that, because I feel like the joy that's going to come out of it is so great.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and thank you for your thoughts. The truth is my pulpit is about 6 inches high. I don't, what works for me may not work for someone else, but I can say that without question that this is a topic that people really do, deep down in their hearts, want to talk about. Mm-hmm. And it's something that our society clearly struggles with. It's, people sort of go off to the hospital and die, and someone else deals with the realities of a dead body and, all these things. But the fact is, there's so much beauty to be lived before all that. And you really only have that possibility if you would acknowledge it and talk about it. And so it has certainly worked for me. And I applaud your work at getting others to talk about it. It's not something that I do easily. Honestly, you may not seem it, but I'm really a very private person, and this is not something that I do with ease to talk about this. But it's been such an epiphany for me that I do think that it's a message that I'd like to get out. And I've had to give up my surgical practice because my fingers at some point went numb from the chemotherapy.
Oh, okay.
And so I've had a hard time helping people, and this is a way that I can help people.
Absolutely. We have to take our last break, but we will come back and continue the conversation with Dr. Jeff Piehler.
Gail Rubin, the Doyenne of Death, has been producing Before I Die festivals for years. These festivals get end-of-life planning conversations started by putting the fun in funeral planning. Outside-the-box activities break down barriers to discussing death and planning for our 100% mortality rate. And now, Gail has created the Before I Die Festival in a Box, the comprehensive guide to producing your own community festival. It includes everything you need to create a successful event, how to find sponsors, build a team, market the event, schedule speakers, topics for discussion, workshop ideas, and much, much more. To learn how to get your Before I Die Festival in a Box, visit beforeidiefestivals.com or call 505-265-7215.
Welcome back. Continuing the conversation with Dr. Jeff Piehler. And, you know, you've been a medical doctor, a thoracic surgeon. I mean, they cut people's chests open. And were you working on hearts or lungs or?
Yeah, I did all that. Yeah. I did open heart surgery for about 20 years, and in the last 5 years of my practice, I pretty much specialize in just cancer surgery of the lungs and esophagus.
So you've been a doctor and you've dealt with patients and their families, and now for the past 10 years you've been a patient dealing with the medical establishment. What kind of advice would you give to patients and their families who are dealing with serious diagnoses from both your perspectives as a doctor and a patient?
Well, I think, I think that these days the level of communication between physicians is so advanced that with very, very few exceptions, there's not one person who has, a solution to a problem that no one else does. And I think that people have a tendency, particularly when they hear bad news, to, go someplace else and try to find good news. And I think that's, I think people should get as many opinions as they feel comfortable with. But I would also say that at some point, one has to accept where you are and to go with the options that are presented. I have not, scurried around the country looking for this guy or that guy. I have decided, and this is just my personal decision, I have decided to find a group of physicians here in town who I have confidence in, who I know want nothing but to give me the best care that they can, and who I know care for me as a person. And I have simply said, I will do what you want. I have, I suppose, the medical knowledge to second guess them, but I don't. And I would recommend that approach to others. It's quite a bit harder being a physician with cancer, certainly terminal cancer, than I think if one is not sort of groomed in the medical profession. A physician simply knows too much, and I know every little grimace on my oncologist's face when he comes into the room that he's got bad news to deliver to me, and when he kind of shifts in his chair, I know that he's thinking of how to parse words a little bit, and so it's having been on that side of it, I understand that, and it is so. I think it is harder to be a physician because you just know you know what the course of the disease is, and you've seen people die, and dying from cancer is not always an easy death, and everyone who has lived that knows that. Now, I have no idea what the quality of my death is going to be in terms of physical challenge, but I'm not afraid of it, and I know that I'll be well cared for. Now, having said all that, I mean, I think you do need to go to a place that has experience in your particular problem, and if I guess I'm thinking specifically of cancer, I think it's you don't want to, I think, go to an institution or a physician who sees one case per year of whatever it is you might have. So I think it is important to find people with experience. But short of that, I think it's important to surround yourself with people that you feel confident have your best interests at heart, and who care for you, and are going to, be willing to stay on the lookout for everything that's new, and make that available to you. I've had several treatments. including the one that I'm doing right now, which for logistical reasons were not available in my home hospital here in Kansas City. And with the absolute blessing of my oncology team, I went up to actually to Lincoln, Nebraska, and they put me in touch with an oncology group up there who were a couple of weeks ahead of getting each of these treatment things, and we wanted to get them started. And so I went there, and I think it's important to find a treatment team that's not afraid to send you elsewhere if they think that there's someone else who might have, a 1 or 2 week advantage if indeed your survival is measured in those terms. On the other hand, I think I feel very sad for the people that go to Mexico and do various what I would consider non-traditional therapies. I'm certainly not saying that American medicine has all the answers, and I know that that there are answers to be found in all kinds of different natural substances. I'll accept that, but I think that the people that go sort of from one to the next to the next to the next without simply stopping and saying death is coming, and the job now is not to keep looking for some hope for cure, but what the job is now is to accept death, and to, by accepting that, enjoy the last moments that you have, and that is incredibly possible for everyone. You just have to stop and enjoy what's there, and see the beauty in the world and the beauty that surrounds you.
Mm-hmm. Will you be going on hospice care at some point when you feel like you're getting to that end point?
Yeah, I'm not there yet. I will do whatever my family wants with that regard. And this, I've, and let me just say this, my wife and I have had the kind of hard conversation such as this. I turned to her, this was probably about 6 months ago. We were kind of laying in bed going off to sleep, and I said, it might be really creepy for you if I die in this bed. Would you like me to die? I definitely want to die at home. No question about that. And then I think she's at ease with that. But I said, would it feel better to you after I'm gone if I have not died in this bed? And I said, I'm absolutely happy to do whatever if that's something that I said, I just want you to think about that, and I will do whatever I can to make that, the way that makes you most comfortable. And she, she said, well, I'll let me think about it, but she said, I think that the mechanics would be that we'd probably have a hospital bed or something for you maybe, but she said, she said she didn't know. And that's fine, but, we had the conversation. But these are not, they're not easy conversations, for sure. And, also, and this is a very difficult thing, but I guess we're getting near the end here, but let me just put this out there. As a physician, one has access to all sorts of medications and drugs and all this kind of thing. And I don't know if you want to talk at all about an elective end of life, but I've obviously given it some thought. If things get, not so much for me, but if I'm feeling just ashamed or guilty that my family is just having to do too much for me, should I just kind of speed this whole thing along? And once again, I discussed that with my friend Peter, and Peter watched his mother die, and he said, Jeff, I think you're trying to control too much here. you have to understand that you're not the only one doing the dying. Everyone is going to die a little bit when you die. Mm-hmm. And if you just sort of, pull the plug when things get hard, you just sort of vanish. And if you vanish, you've deprived people of the chance to show you how much they care for you. And you deprive them of understanding why it is that you have to leave. And so I've gone on record as saying I do believe that one should have the option of electively ending one's life, but I'd have to say I'm much more hesitant to exercise that. But once again, it's something that's worth talking about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, one last question. Where are you keeping the coffin?
Oh, it's down in Piehler's shop.
Okay.
We have a wood-burning fire down there, and it's been really cold in Kansas City of late, as it has been everywhere. And so we have this wood stove, totally stoked up with nice oak, and we Peter and I sit in front of the fire, and then to our right is this beautiful piece of wood, and we put our feet up on it, and we drink a beer. And it's there, and it's something that talks to us, and it's a reminder of our friendship, and it's a reminder of the frailty of life, and it's a reminder of how we should live life.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Jeffrey Piehler, thank you so much for spending this time and sharing your thoughts with us. It's been a magical and enlightening hour, and it flew by way too fast.
Well, thank you so much, Gail. I'm very flattered that you cared for my opinion. I really am. Thank you.
Thank you. So remember, you can download resources from my website at agoodgoodbye.com. And remember, talking about sex won't make you pregnant. Talking about funerals won't make you dead. So everybody, start a conversation today.
Gail Rubin, the Doyenne of Death, is the author of 3 award-winning books. In A Good Goodbye, Funeral Planning for Those Who Don't Plan to Die, learn how to save money, reduce family conflict, and minimize stress at a time of grief. Just as talking about sex won't make you pregnant, talking about funerals won't make you dead, and your family will benefit from the conversation. Kicking the Bucket List, 100 downsizing and organizing things to do before you die, brings a light touch to downsizing and organizing for end-of-life issues. And Hail and Farewell, Cremation Ceremonies, Templates and Tips helps you easily create meaningful memorial services with sample scripts, suggested readings, and music recommendations. These fine books by Gail Rubin, The Doyenne of Death, are available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. For more information, visit agoodgoodbye.com. Thank you for joining us on the Doyenne of Death podcast. You can find episodes of this podcast and past episodes of A Good Goodbye with Gail Rubin on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information on Gail's work, visit agoodgoodbye.com.